welcome back on the Untold, where we get amazing guests and we get to share stories of different people. Ahmed, are you
Hi.
excited
Yeah,
about
of
today's
course,
guest?
always.
Today we have, I would say, one of the most interesting guests.
hmm
He comes from an amazing background.
Yeah,
So
incredible background and a resume that extends. It's a lot, you
beyond.
know, and he knows a lot. He has a lot to say. So let's welcome him right after this.
Fahed Alsumait, let's meet him.
We're back on the Untold, being joined by our very special guest, Fahed ALMazeedi. Welcome on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having
Welcome
me.
on the show. So you have a very interesting CV. We were just saying that
Yeah.
before, the interview. So I don't know where to start. I mean, you started studying journalism. Can you just tell us a bit about that?
Sure. Actually, I'll even start before
Yeah,
that.
before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we want to hear the whole
Before
The,
story.
the,
Story.
whole, the whole story is quite long. I'm getting old.
yeah.
So I'm come from a mixed background. My mother's American, my father's Kuwaiti, and so I grew up in the States. Used to come to Kuwait in the summers only, as everybody else was leaving. It was me
Right.
coming in, and I did that for about 20 years.
Wow.
And I had lots of questions about, where do I want to live? What do I want to do? And this is sort of this split between my American and my Kuwaiti side is part of what led me into journalism. I actually, like a lot of undergraduate students, didn't know what I wanted to study when I got into university. So I mean, I tried different majors.
You were undecided?
I was undecided. I mean, I was one of those that thought everything looked good. And so I tried psychology. I was in political science for a while. I had a professor encourage me to go into chemistry. But actually, it was the Kuwait government that led me into journalism in a kind of roundabout way. I was trying to get the scholarship for my undergraduate studies because I was already going to school in the States. And at the time, you have to look at the list and see what are the approved majors. And the only one that I saw that actually appealed to me was computer engineering. They didn't have journalism at that time.
Oh.
And so I thought I'd try computer engineering. And I did that for one semester and realized that actually wasn't for me at all. So the next year I went back, looked at the list again, still in pursuit of the scholarship. And they had added journalism for the first time. And I thought, journalism actually sounds interesting. I like to write. I've always done fairly well with writing in school. I'm curious about the news. So I decided to give it a shot. And that's what led me into journalism as an undergrad student.
Like, what was your next step afterwards? What did you want to, accomplish?
Well, my ambitions of studying journalism and the reality of actually trying to get a job in journalism after university were, I guess, confused a bit by the fact that I decided I wanted to move back to Kuwait. So having grown up in the States, I had, an interest in coming and spending time living with my family here, trying to reconnect with my roots on this side of my heritage.
Was that the reasoning for moving back?
That was the reason that I moved back. I'd spent 20 years
20 years.
living abroad.
It's probably a weird question, but did you get any culture shock?
I got plenty of culture shock.
Yeah.
Summer visits to Kuwait are certainly not quite enough to prepare you. And of course, I've also always struggled a bit with Arabic. And so, especially when I first moved back, the English wasn't quite as widespoken as it is now. And so I had these ambitions so my training was in print journalism.
Right.
I had these ambitions of coming here and working as maybe an investigative journalist or working, for example, as you do with the Ministry of Information. And then I got here and I realized that actually the kind of training I'd had in the United States wasn't really a good fit for the kind of print journalism that was
Right.
happening in Kuwait in English. And in Arabic, I think it was quite a different thing, but
Yeah.
in English, not so much. And so I ended up going what felt to me at the time like going to the dark side. So when you study print journalism, sort of the antithesis of that are the PR people. Because they're always trying to, put a spin on news and information and present things in a certain way. But then I found myself actually working in public relations and corporate communication because it was the kind of job where my English skills were an asset instead of my lack of Arabic being a hindrance.
Right.
Well, it was still a bit of a hindrance, but not too bad. And so I ended up working at Kuwait Petrochemical Company for about 6 years, working for public relations and trying to make plastic, I think, look pretty.
Okay, interesting.
Then you, you went and had a teaching career. How did that
Yeah,
go?
well, how did
Yeah,
you switch
What
into
happened?
that?
Again, sort of
Segue
a
into that,
circuitous
yeah.
route to get there. Really, I mean, it might sound trite, but it was actually the events of September 11th that caused me to really reshift my thinking about, my career, what I wanted to do. All the geopolitical fallout of September 11th really left me questioning a lot about how different sides, people on different sides of my heritage, just continually misunderstand each other in lots of different ways. And while that's something I'd been curious about my whole life, everyone's always asking me wherever I am, I'm marked by the identity of the other, right? When I'm in America, it's my name and my Arab side that stands
Yeah.
out. When I'm here, it's the American side that
Right.
stands out. But I was interested in trying to find out a little bit more systematically what I could learn about sort of what was going on, why these miscommunications and misperceptions exist. So I decided to pursue a master's degree in intercultural communication. And then as I was doing that, I became much more interested in the geopolitical context and shifted from my PhD into political communication. Now, going through and getting your master's and your PhD kind of restricts your job opportunities. A lot of people think, the more education you get, the more opportunities you have. But of course, when you get a PhD, there's a lot of limitations on the kinds of places that will hire you. And so you kind of end up getting restricted into education as the primary way to apply a PhD.
So you feel like you got into education because you had to?
Not exactly. I mean, I was interested in education. And so, I knew what I was getting into as I did the master's and the PhD. And I was interested also in taking the things I was learning and trying to also teach other people about them.
Right.
But the reason I sort of didn't see other options besides academia is because I was getting the PhD. And I also had this feeling as I was doing more research on the region that a lot of the academic scholarship on the Middle East is done by people who don't live here. And I wanted to sort of be a person who was living here, not only teaching, but also, producing knowledge, generating research from within the region itself. And so that's what really got me into academia.
So let's talk about the challenges you faced, teaching. I'm pretty sure you did have a lot of challenges, especially with the, Kuwaiti community and trying to, deliver your experience to Kuwaiti mindset.
So while I was going to do my master's and my PhD, I was doing teaching and research assistantships at the time. So I had the opportunity to teach classes as a master's and PhD student. And then I had a year where I just did field work. I had a Fulbright Hayes Fellowship. I came to Kuwait and was doing field work related to this geopolitical situation I was talking about. And so that kind of took me away from the teaching for a little while. And then I had a postdoc fellowship at the National University of Singapore for a year where I also wasn't required to teach. It was just about producing research. And so when I came back to Kuwait, even though I had teaching experience, it felt like a little aged. And so mixing that with coming into a different cultural environment with trying to teach, it certainly had some of its challenges. I mean, some of the challenges were institutional. The university that I came back to work in was relatively new. The private universities weren't that old at that time. And they were still, building themselves, working out policies and procedures and curriculum and all the kind of boring behind the scenes stuff that goes on in academia. And so that was a challenge because I was used to, my education was all in very established and old universities where these things had long been sort of, I guess, figured out. So part of the challenge was coming back and being just a faculty member. Part of the challenge was, of course, the teaching. The style of the students was different than what I was used to. Very respectful students, very nice. Not always motivated the same way that students, for example, in, say, a place like Singapore or the United States often are, because of many of the privileges that are here. People are not paying for their own school. Many of them...
The luxury of, having everything
or
given to you at a young age. That would be.
For a lot of students, there's also almost a guarantee of some kind of employment when they finish. And, having those opportunities, while wonderful privileges in a lot of respects, takes away a little bit of the hunger that I saw in students, for example, often in the States that might be working multiple jobs, or they're on what we call the Pell Grant, or, getting support from the government to help them go to school, or they're taking major loans. And so because they're often financing it, or their families are financing it directly, because they know that the job market is super competitive, you tend to get students who are motivated differently. And so for me, trying to figure out how to motivate students here was a bit of a challenge, because there's different expectations for them. And there were some ways that I found that worked very well.
All right. Now, could you tell us about your time in Singapore?
Yeah. My area of interest, and my background was journalism, then intercultural communication, then political communication. And through that journey, I became also very interested in Middle East studies. And even today, the intersection between Middle East studies, which is largely done from international relations or area studies or political science, and communication, they don't really overlap very much. It tends to be people like myself who have some kind of an Arabic background that work in communication, that start to look at the Middle East picture. And so when I was looking for a job, I saw this postdoc position in Singapore for a newly established Middle East Institute that they were setting up there. And I was just coming off of a Fulbright Hays Fellowship, which is also usually not given to communication scholars. But I think because it had the Middle East component, it was something they were interested in supporting. And when they saw that I was doing this kind of work that looked at the intersections between Middle East studies and communication and media, that was something that they found interesting. And so I had the great opportunity to go there and be part of this interdisciplinary group of scholars. We had anthropologists, political scientists, economists, we had people that were in arts and literature. And the thing that kind of was the cohesive glue for everybody there was the interest in the Middle East, but exploring it from so many different perspectives. And so for me, this was like, I'd gone from years of being like the only guy on campus interested in the things I was interested in, to all of a sudden being surrounded by, all these wonderful people doing all sorts of interesting work I'd never even really thought about. And so that for me, it was like, it was heaven. I mean, academic heaven, right? It's a bunch of nerds all getting together and talking about, the things that we enjoy from different perspectives. And I found it really challenging and really exciting.
So I would love to continue this, conversation, but now let's go on a break, and then we'll come back and, continue this talk.
We're back on the Untold, being joined again with Fahed ALMusailem. Welcome on the show again.
Thank you.
We're having a beautiful conversation, telling us about your experiences. I believe Hadeel has a very
Yeah, I
important
do have a
question.
question. So, you said you've been to Singapore, Kuwait, and the US. You lived your life between 3 different countries. How would you compare, your experience, your lifestyle? How would you compare, different mindsets, getting to know different cultures? How was that?
Exciting. I mean, part of the reason I went to study intercultural communication as a master's student was because of my fascination with cultures and the ways in which culture affects the way that we all view the world and interact with one another. So for me, the opportunity to move between cultures has always been a privilege. I think it's one of the reasons a lot of people like traveling, for example, right? Just to experience another culture. I mean, each of them had their benefits and their drawbacks. As someone who's lived back and forth, especially between the U.S. and Kuwait, if I stay in America long enough, then I really miss Kuwait. If I'm in Kuwait long enough, I really miss going back to America. So there's always this feeling of there's something else that you're missing out
A
on.
little homesick.
Yeah. But as I get older, I also try and appreciate more the things that I get to experience within the place that I'm at. So, for example, when I moved back as an undergraduate student and a bachelor, after living alone for years, I then moved in with my family here. And that was quite an adjustment and something
Right,
that
because
frankly,
you were
yeah,
used to being on your own.
exactly. And,
Right.
people asking, so where are you going now? And who are you hanging out with? What family are they from? Where,
Right, and you're
where,
not
yeah,
used to all
and I'm
that.
just, yeah, I didn't mind sharing it, but it was just weird. Or, having
Yeah.
someone monitor your movements sort of thing.
Right,
And of
right.
course, all the obligations that come with being here, especially, in a place like Kuwait, which is in America, you get usually a lot of space from your families.
Yeah,
Here you get
yeah.
restrictions. You
Here,
get rules,
No,
restrictions.
we're close-knitted here. We're
yes,
close
yeah.
to our family members. We have weekly
I think it's
gatherings.
a positive
Exactly.
thing
Right.
sometimes. It's
Yeah, oh, it's a great
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
It was just something that took a bit of an adjustment for
Adjustment,
me. So when I was here back at that age,
Mm.
for me, it was something that was a
What age
little
was that?
chafing. Well, what year was that? I moved back in 1998. But, now I'm, after living in Singapore and then moving back here, married with kids, we've had the opportunity to actually move back in to my family's house. And we live above my father at his house, and I love it. It's just a different mindset as you get older and you start to really appreciate, as you're saying,
Right.
the close-knit aspects of society and culture. And maybe I wander a bit less now that I'm a married man with kids and career and all of that. So I'm more of a homebody. And so
Okay.
it fits, I think, well with this situation. So that was kind of an adjustment then that now I look at as a blessing.
Do you think that affected your kids, your experience, your life, moving from different countries? How did that affect your kids, your family, your
Yes.
the entire family? Like, did your wife adjust to it? Did your kids, enjoy the experience?
Just to complicate things, my wife is British, so my kids are probably pretty confused, I'm sure. Maybe their
That
therapist can
is-
answer that
yeah,
question for
that
them in
is
the future.
interesting mixture
yeah.
right there.
But yeah, I mean, a big part of my reason for staying in this part of the world beyond my own sort of academic interest were, of course, staying close to the roots and seeing how I was distant from the culture in many ways growing up. I didn't really want this for my kids. And in today's mediated age, where there's so much technology and it's so easy to have access to the world around you, I figured it's much easier for our kids living in Kuwait to understand British and American life and culture than it is to live in Kuwait or I mean, in the U.S. or in England and have a good understanding
Right.
of Kuwaiti culture. So it was, I think, an
Best of both
opportunity.
worlds.
Yeah, an opportunity, best
Yeah.
of three worlds, really.
Three worlds.
An opportunity for them to experience that. And also for me, the
I'm
language.
curious. You mentioned the language, English specifically, since you're American and she's British, and you're half Kuwaiti as well. But what's the accent the kids are speaking in?
Do they speak Kuwaiti?
Yeah, they speak American
They speak
style,
American English?
They got their
English,
dad's
yes,
side.
to
Okay.
my wife's chagrin. And actually, I would prefer if they had a British accent because I like it.
But how did that happen? Like, is it something you choose before you teach
No,
them?
no,
Like, how did that happen?
it's funny because when they're younger, they tend to actually have more of a British accent, and then as
Okay.
they get older,
It
the
just
accent
phased
morphs.
out,
And I think a lot of it comes down
Americanized.
to the media products and things
Right,
that they consume.
everything is
Right?
Americanized.
They're
We
much
also,
more.
to society, you don't find many British in here, so American
Yes, it's
is more
pretty
approachable
Americanized.
here in
Yeah.
Yeah,
Kuwait.
yeah. And
So they will probably learn it.
And
more
the
easier.
Arabic?
the Arabic, so to their consternation, we've had them studying Arabic for as long as they can remember.
Uh-huh.
But as you both know well, one of the difficulties of studying Arabic versus speaking Arabic is, the Fusha versus the Amiyya.
Right.
And so they've
Right.
been studying Arabic and they do really well
So
in classical
can
Arabic,
they,
the modern standard.
do they speak Kuwaiti?
They can pretend to speak Kuwaiti in limited spurts depending on the conversation. And
Okay.
my older daughter, who's 13 now, is even stronger. And she, a lot of their friends are Kuwaitis, but a lot of their Kuwaiti
Cool.
friends also speak English, too, right? And they
Right.
go to an American school.
Right.
So yes, they throw in lots of Kuwaiti phrases in everyday conversation. But when they're put on the spot, for example, I take them to some kind of family event and people start speaking to them
In Arabic.
They'll
uh,
mingle.
they feel,
lost.
I mean, well, they can understand
They can,
fairly
I think
well,
understanding more so than
but
the
they don't
talking.
want to speak because they've been taught to speak in modern standard Arabic,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Not in Kuwaiti dialect,
Right.
and so it's a bit awkward. And so I think they also struggle a bit with it. But the Arabic that they have now, mashallah, it's a lot better than my Arabic probably is even to today. because they've had that exposure since an early age. We put them in a school that was bilingual for a number of years. They have a tutor that was coming to the house twice a week for, God, 10 years.
Oh, wow. All right.
And so, I mean, they've had lots of opportunities to work
That's
on
great.
that.
That's
Yeah.
great to hear. So, what do you hope for the future then?
The future of my kids, or the future,
future
of
of your
Kuwait, or
career.
the future of my career? Oh, that's
The future of Kuwait. That's a good question.
That's a big one. Well, okay. So for the future of my career, I've recently switched university. I'm now working at the American University
Right.
of Kuwait, and after spending years of doing a lot of administrative work as well as teaching, I'm glad to just be back to being a teacher primarily.
All right.
And so I enjoy, I think, having that space, not only to really focus on teaching, but also on research. And I also do service for the broader community. So I mentioned, for example, one of the questions that concerns that I had was that a lot of studies of the Middle East are done by people outside of the Middle East. And I've since become the president of an association, the largest association of scholars on Arabian Peninsula, Gulf and Arabian Peninsula studies. And so I'm trying really hard with a group of incredible scholars to really help bring sort of the worldwide group of people studying this part of the region into conversation with each other from different disciplines. And so for me, when I look at sort of the future, academically speaking, of Gulf studies, it looks quite promising. I think there's been an incredible growth I've seen over the years that I've been part of this organization. In terms of the sophistication and the quality and the range of subjects people study looking at this region. In the old days, it was oil and oppression and security. Those were the topics that people studied. But now there's people asking questions related to things like identity and culture and a much more robust view of the human condition in this part of the world. So looking at the future of sort of that scholarship, I'd like to be able to make my small contribution to helping scholars in that area. In terms of my other aspects of my career, because I've had the opportunity to kind of work up the academic corporate ladder, I don't have those ambitions anymore. I'm quite happy.
You're satisfied.
I'm satisfied, and I find that
That's
having much more time. It doesn't mean that I'm completely away from it. I still get pulled into lots of admin, not lots, but enough admin stuff. But I've had the time to do a lot more research. And my research at the moment is looking at digital inequalities, the difference between those who have access and benefits from technologies and those that don't. And I think that I'd like to continue diving into this because there's a big push in Kuwait about this concept of digital transformation and what it means. And a lot of people feel like it's just a matter of providing the technology and it will happen. But because we live in an expatriate majority society, there's actually a large portion of the society here that's not benefiting from the technology and the infrastructure in ways that they could. And as a result, society itself is not benefiting. So I think continuing to work on digital inequalities research, trying to figure out ways to bridge the digital divide a little bit more in Kuwait, this is part of my future ambitions too.
So, okay, my next questions, I'm just gonna jump into something else.
Okay.
Let's talk about, passion. I mean, you had a passion, you pursued it, you had ambition. Honestly, I think you are a role model. I mean,
Yeah.
thinking about it.
I mean,
I
with
mean,
this resume of yours.
yeah, it's quite interesting. So you had to leave your comfort zone to pursue something that you wanted and things you didn't even want. So what would you say people that hesitate when it comes to, pursuing their dreams, pursuing their passion, but they don't want to leave the comfort zone? Like me, I don't
Yeah.
like leaving my comfort zone, to be honest.
Most of us don't. I think it was Mark Zuckerberg who said the biggest risk is not to take a risk. And sometimes you do have to take some risk. You do have to break out of your comfort zone to grow a bit. I mean, I always kind of chuckle to myself when I hear, I don't know, athletes and celebrities say, just follow your dreams, because it's not always that easy for people. You have to have the opportunities, the privileges, the luck, etc. And really the thing that I think I can bring to the table, even if there are people who are smarter or that have more knowledge or that are just more talented at things, is my mother instilled in me a very strong work ethic.
What's that?
just working
Just
hard.
the
Work
work. Just
ethics.
okay.
I mean,
I
work
thought that was something
ethics.
specific.
No,
instead
no,
of-
I wish I had a more beautiful nugget to give you. But essentially, a lot of success comes down to just really rolling up your sleeves and giving it a shot. And when you fail, trying again, and trying to learn from when you fail, and not letting that psychologically put you down, but instead trying to extract something that you can learn from that, so you don't put yourself in that situation again. And for me, just constantly pushing and pushing and pushing, trying hard when I was a graduate student, trying to teach when I felt like I was, in the same situation as the students I was teaching. It came down to me trying to put in harder work because I felt that many of them knew much more than I did about lots of different things. When I came back, or when I moved to Singapore, I'm surrounded by all these incredible and very well-known scholars. And the thing that I felt like I could really contribute, besides the communication angle, was that I would work hard. And when I came back to Kuwait, and it was about trying to adjust to the kind of academic situation here and the types of students, it wasn't about like throwing up my hands and saying, oh, well, these students aren't like the students I'm used to, so there's some kind of inherent problem with them. Instead, it's like, how can I work harder to figure out a way that can engage them, that can do things that make them want to learn. So for me, the secret, well, I don't have the secret to success, but the thing that has helped me the most is not being afraid to just plug away at things and just keep trying to persevere. And, that mixed with privileges that I've had as someone growing up between cultures, privileges, well, good luck that I've had to be able to earn things like the Fulbright Hayes Fellowship or the postdoc.
But you earned those things. Trust me.
I hope so. I
You,
think so.
you earned them. You worked hard for them. So
You sure
But I mean, so when I got the Fulbright Hayes Fellowship, I was quite taken aback because I think I'm the only Kuwaiti in history of the 70-year program that's gotten it. And I'm one of only a handful of communication scholars. And when they said that I was getting it, I thought there must be a mistake because I know there were a lot of better people that are more qualified that had
maybe
applied
that's
as well.
what you think.
Well, I think what it came down to was I was interested in something that they also found interesting, and it was being approached from a novel perspective that they didn't normally see.
I believe that everyone gets opportunities, but not everyone uses them. Anyway, it was really nice having you on the show. I had a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Lost track of time, honestly.
Honestly, I want to talk more. I want to
Yeah.
get to know you more, but time's up. And, maybe like behind the scenes, we'll talk more. You are such an interesting person. You have an amazing background. At my age, I don't think I accomplished like half of what you did.
It's not a competition. Okay?
It's
It's
not
not
a
a
competition. No.
I'm a very competitive person,
Ah, okay.
trust me. So, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Thank you for your time today and for
Appreciate it.
coming on the show.
All right. Thank you.
We'll be back for the wrap up. Well, what did you think?
I thought it was interesting. I
Right.
mean, his story, his background, his resume,
Mm.
the things he's seen. I'm what, 30? I've never seen most of the things he's seen in his life.
Again, it's not a competition.
It's not a competition, but I'm kind of a competitive
There's something he
person.
said that reminded me of something. Fail upwards. When you fail, you need to get back up. So fail upwards.
And as I said, not everyone gets opportunities.
Yeah.
But and a lot of people do get opportunities but never use them.
Mm.
And I think that's where we fail mainly. So
We need to seek that opportunity. Whenever it presents itself, we need to
grab it,
grab it.
definitely.
Definitely.
So we're done today.
We're done for today. Join us next time with another guest with more stories to share right here on The Untold. Good night.
Good night.